Robert Kyagulanyi brought the petition to the Supreme Court in 2021, the court set itself to hear that petition, but he eventually decided to withdraw the petition. So the correct position is that the actual petition was never heard, and I think you can refer to the reasons that appellant Robert Kyagulanyi gave. I think he said, I don't believe we'll get justice at the court, so we'll take this petition to the public court. So what we decided in that case, before the withdrawal took place, there were 3 applications that were brought to the court. The first application was an application by Robert Kyagulanyi, I think is commonly known as Bobby Wine, but of course, when you come to court, you use your official names, so I'll stick to the official names, where he was asking the court to be given permission to amend his petition. And the reason he gave is that in 2021, the moment he finished casting his vote, he was put under house arrest. And it took an order of the High Court for him to be released after 10 days. And by that time, he had 5 days left to file the petition. So he argued that although he filed a presidential petition, he had lost valuable time and he needed time to amend his petition. In that case, the court considered his application and the court did not allow him to amend. Now that I'm a retired judge, I will share this, that in the discussions that we had, I and another colleague were in favor of allowing Kyagulanyi to amend his petition. And those who listened to my discussions, to my ruling, will recall that later on I gave the reasons regarding the circumstances under which, we disallowed, but later on I said we should have allowed him to amend his petition. And at a personal level, I'll share this openly. I was in favor, but when I looked at everyone's reasoning, and I realized I was standing alone, but I also realized that despite the fact that he had had only 5 days, there was enough substance in that petition to enable the court to make the inquiry that is required to make under the Constitution. So on those grounds, I decided to go along with my colleagues, and we disallowed that application, but said, let him bring the evidence to support the allegations that he had put in. The court reasoned that the time for filing, we have a strict timeline, and we needed, we couldn't allow him to amend his petition. So I went along with my colleagues, but my conviction had been that there was enough substance in what he had submitted for us to be able to do our job. But at that position, when I delivered my reasoned rulings, I cited our earlier decision in the Mbabazi case, where we had actually allowed the petitioner, Amama Mbabazi, to amend his petition. So, as judges, we make errors, I should have stood my ground then, but again, at the time, that was the first application. Maybe I wasn't able to stand up to the pressure, at the time. And that was, counteracted by the fact that I was convinced there were grounds in the petition to enable him to proceed. So he brought a second application when he was unable to file all his affidavit evidence in court. Now, when it came to the second application, and the reasons, I think that time he had Counsel Segona, who addressed court during the hearing and saying, we are having trouble collecting evidence. We are not sleeping at our homes. We can't even work from our offices. The offices of the National Unity Party are under siege. The home of the president had been, under siege. Even the president himself did not have permission to leave until, 5 days to the end of the time to file the petition. These were submissions. If one accesses the record of proceedings in the 2021 applications that were filed in that petition, these were submissions which were made by counsel for Robert Kyagulanyi. He said the polling agents, our witnesses are being locked up. They were rounded up. We can't access them. So there were all those issues. And as a result, when they came to filing their evidence, they were not able to file all the evidence in the time that the court had given them. So they made an application to be given time to file the remaining evidence in court so that the court can have all the evidence they had collected. And the court, my colleagues, the majority were 9 of us, and 8 of my colleagues said no. And in that case, I said, now is the time for me to stand my ground. So I told my colleagues on this one, I'm dissenting. And so that was an 8-1 ruling where I was very clear. And the reasoning was, if we told the petitioner that you can't amend your petition, but bring in the evidence that you have. The Constitution provides that substantive, the court, should not be, focused on procedural matters, should focus on substantive justice. And the evidence was, had already been, I think they were stopped at the court because they didn't meet the time deadline that had been set. So for me, substantive justice demanded that we give them more time, especially given the reasons that had been given, openly submitted on by counsel for Robert Kyagulanyi in court. So I dissented. So when the court declined to give Robert time to file his additional evidence, then I think that's the time. And of course, when we went to court, there were also addresses that were being made by the Chief Justice. I think one of the famous ones was like, if you have plan B, you can go to plan B. This is, like, which I thought were not in order. If a party has come to court, you are supposed to restrict yourself to what a matter has before court. But anyway, based on all those, whatever considerations, I think the records are there. Kyagulanyi decided to withdraw the petition. And now, so the third petition application was like whether we should ask him to pay for costs or whether the court should decide that the costs should be borne by each party. So the rulings for each of those the two applications were made on the day the applications were heard. They were brief rulings. But in those circumstances, the court has a right to make a ruling and to give the reasons for the ruling later on. And that's what the court did and informed the parties accordingly. There was also another application, an interesting application. President Semakade mentioned it, which was made by Mabilizi. And Mabilizi came to court. As you know, under our constitution, the provision for challenging the outcome of presidential elections is very restrictive. The right is only given to those who contested in the race. The rest of Ugandans who cast their votes are left out of that provision. But Mabilizi brought his application under Article 3 of the Constitution and saying, he has a duty. We have a duty to defend the Constitution. And he challenged, I think he was seeking for the Chief Justice then, Justice Owiny Dolo, to recuse himself because there were reports that he had met with the president 2 times when we had begun hearing the petition. So, when that application was submitted, I asked the Chief Justice whether he wanted to hear this application by himself. And he said, we all need to hear it. In that application, Mabilizi had also said he wanted, I think, the proceedings to be quashed, or the orders, basically saying, because the Chief Justice had met with the president during the hearing of the, while the petition was pending, he should recuse himself from presiding or even hearing the presidential election petition. And so, on the orders of the Chief Justice, we all had the application for recusal. But I was very surprised when, after hearing the application, then the Chief Justice said, I'm the only one who should be writing my ruling because the recusal application was, made against me. Anyone who has sat in any court knows that if you hear a matter, you are required to make a ruling on the matters that you've heard. So I informed my colleagues that I was going to write a ruling on that matter as well. And their precedents, I don't have time to go into them, which show that when a recusal application is made against a judge, other members of the court also are entitled to write their rulings on the matter. And even if the judge in question believes that he should not recuse himself. I think there was a case which involved Justice Ogola when he was sitting on the Comesa court. We can look it up and share it. But it covered that very issue where Justice Ogola declined to recuse himself, but the court pronounced itself on the matter, even those against whom the application had not been, those who had not been the subject of the application. So I think, in short, I just wanted to say that's basically what happened. Of course, subsequently, there are many versions that came up, and at that time I was a judge, and I chose to restrict myself from speaking about these matters, hoping that the legal processes in the country would take their course, and I would be able to defend myself and against any matters that came up. if at all, as they did. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. That was 2021. We are now in February 2026, and you all know what has been going on. But again, during this space, maybe we'll get back to it.
Ensonga ezo zibadde mpanvu. Oluvannyuma lw'ebyo byonna, omulamuzi retired Lady Justice Dr. Esther Kitimbo Kisakye yadduka mu ggwanga olw'embeera eyamuteekebwako. Naye kambaza nnyire wano abannyonnyole, pulogulaamu eno yabadde mpanvu. Ebyayogeddwa byabadde biwanvu, okubaganya ebirowoozo kwabadde kuwanvu. Specifically nzigyemu ebyo ebikwatagana ku mukutu guno ne bye tubaweereza. Kiki ekyamuddusa mu ggwanga?
Again, the circumstances are well documented in my petition to the Constitutional Court of Uganda, which I filed in October 2022. That's a public record which can be accessed by anyone, and I think I saw the petition. If you search, maybe one of these days I'll put it on my X link, so that those who want to get the details can get the full details, because an organization accessed this petition and put it online. But in summary, after I decided to stand by my judicial oath and the Constitution of Uganda, the Chief Justice, falsely made what he called a referral to the Judicial Service Commission, where he turned the tables and said, I had, my files. Of course, that time, what happened at the Supreme Court on March 18th, everybody was publicly recorded. They tried to turn off the lights. They chased out court attendants. The police officers who were attached to the Chief Justice grabbed all the files. I went back to the courtroom, tried to retrieve my file from the Chief Justice, and first of all from the registry, and the court clerk then, Ewanulu Wangula, who is still, I think, maybe still serving, but is associated with it's believed he's associated with state agencies, but nevertheless is a court clerk at the Supreme Court. Said he had taken the files to the Chief Justice. And I went up to the boardroom where I found the Chief Justice and some of my colleagues seated. My files were not in the boardroom. I asked them whether they had seen my files. One of our colleagues, who has since passed on, tried to tell me to first sit down, and I realized there was a conspiracy going on. So at that point, I realized the files had been somewhere locked up or hidden somewhere, and my file had been locked up somewhere in the court building. And that's when I made the decision to return to my office and print off a copy, which was not the full ruling, because part of my ruling was in hand, but I printed off the typed copy and I delivered that in the afternoon on March 18th. And because the afternoon proceedings had been long, I deferred delivering my ruling in the Mabilis matter the following day, and on that day the gates of the court were locked up to all litigants and court users. So following those developments, the Chief Justice then sent a letter, a 16-page letter to the Judicial Service Commission, chaired by Justice Kabito then, where he made all sorts of allegations, and some of them, which I recall very well, were that I had made remarks against him and brought the office of the Chief Justice in disrepute, and that and the judiciary as well, and that I disrespected him, The other allegation was that I had not been delivering a ruling or a judgment. Otherwise, I was actually addressing a press conference. There was also another allegation that I had spoken to a litigant, Mabirizi in particular. And all these are matters that, again, these are attachments to my petition in the Constitutional Court. And the procedure for disciplining judges is well laid out under our laws. That procedure is initiated by a complaint, and the complaint must answer to certain requirements. It should not be abusive. It should, of course, spell out what where the judge, what charges are being the judge is being accused of, or what conduct or misconduct. And the Chief Justice's letter failed in all those aspects. Then he accused me actually of also falsely accusing him of taking his file. But by the grace of God, he also made an admission that actually he had access to my file, and he had it for safe custody, and he had kept it for safe custody and actually read part of my ruling. Nevertheless, he didn't have my files. So that is the basis of everything else that has gone on, which culminated into the tribunal that was the report first by the Judicial Service Commission, and the petitions that are pending. 3 petitions I filed in the Constitutional Court, which to date have never been heard. And finally, I think in February of last year, to the President appointing the Judicial Tribunal of Inquiry, which has never sat to date, and I have no idea where they are or whether they are sitting. But I have written a commentary which was shared on my X, and also shared with the people of Uganda and with the President of Uganda, the Chief Justice of Uganda, the Attorney General of Uganda, the Uganda Law Society, the Judicial Service Commission, where I laid out all the grounds why that tribunal, the appointment of that tribunal, is constitutionally indefensible and not sound. And all those are publicly available documents. And time permitting, or those who want to look at all those grounds, you can check out on my X. They were in a couple of series, but if you put it together, you'll see from the beginning the terms of the legal notice, and the grounds of my objections to that, to the tribunal. And then I'm sure on this forum we have many lawyers. You can read for, even non-lawyers, you can read for yourself. But one of the main points I'm making is that, one, I'm a retired judge. The tribunal has no jurisdiction over me, a retired judge. And secondly, I served, and I was a corrupt-free judge. And they are wasting resources, and I was doing my work. So those, and there are many other reasons. And of course, the Chief Justice and the Attorney General had, the Chief Justice did not have standing. It was not a referral. So there are many reasons that I give, but my lawyers remain ready. If the government or still believes they want to pursue this process, that's up to them to make. We will, I remain ready to defend myself through my lawyers.
Mu kiseera nga bannansi mukaluubiriziddwa nga mwabbibwa obululu nga munoonya ekiddako yiggwe nange n'omukyalo n'omulamuzi ffenna tuba twetaagisa tekiri ku Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu ng'akulembeddemu buli muntu mu kapasite yo ne bw'oba weenyooma gwe tolina ky'osobola kukola gwe kasita oba ng'osobola okutambula nga n'omutwe gukyasobola okutegeera nti oli munnayuganda ekyo kyokka ne at worst okuvumirira nga tolina ky'osobola kukolawo naye nga bw'otuula ovumirira nga tokkiriza kuteekamu mu mitwe bigambo bigamba nti ekyakolebwa kyali kituufu already oba otemyewo evvuunika erisooka kaakati bassebo ne bannyabo omulamuzi ono yayogedde kalulu akabaddewo mu Uganda agamba tekayina tteeka nalimu okwetoolola ensi yonna eno gy'asomyeko ey'amateeka gye kaagoberedde neegi n'emu tewaliiwo wantu wonna wonna kalulu kano we yalabye ye ng'omulamuzi we kaatuukiriza yadde akalikonda k'okubanga katuukiriza amateeka gonna g'amanyi ng'omulamuzi omukyalo ono yali munnamateeka ku myaka 21 kaakati waakoledde vidiyo eno ng'alina emyaka 66 kaakati waakugamba nti ku 21 already yali ayingidde amateeka aba amaze emyaka emeka ng'asoma amateeka jjukira obulamuzi osala ng'omanyi amateeka ne wa w'osinzidde kitegeeza oba wagataganjula n'agatali mu constitution yo ng'olina w'osobola okwesigamya ne bwe ziba ku nsi ndala elsewhere agamanyi era ne judicial system ey'ensi kati saawa eno gye yaddukira mu exile agitegeera bulungi bw'akugamba ekyo trust me kyayogerako aba akimanyi kakati katugende muwulire yayogedde atya ku kalulu.
I think my comments are still relevant. When we talk about judicial independence, if you go back, like I said, for now, if we agree that the 1995 Constitution is our supreme law and governing document, judges are exercising power on behalf of the people of Uganda. So, the judges are supposed to hear disputes and they are supposed to follow the Constitution and the law. So when you file a case, first of all, as a person you need, and this applies to everyone, judges decide cases that have been brought before them. If you have a good case, make sure that as you conduct your affairs, you keep your documentation properly. If you buy land, make sure that the agreement is properly witnessed, you take photographs. Gen Zs even keep some of these documents on X, email, so that like if somebody comes to grab your land, for example, you have the evidence. Where, when you are paying them, where are you paying them? They are, are you giving cash? Are you getting receipts? Are you making sure you get their national IDs? So there are different ways of documenting all that. And then when you bring a strong case to court, then insist on your rights. Some of the judges, and I've been a judge, I will defend some of my colleagues. It's not, sometimes you have bad tomatoes good tomatoes. Not all judges are bad. Some are trying to do their job, while we have within our midst, again, corrupt judges. But how are you going to distinguish between a corrupt judge and a non-corrupt judge if you don't bring a good case to court? So bring a good case to court. Make sure that your lawyers, and now I'm talking about lawyers. Lawyers have also, I'm sorry to say, but you have also soiled the names of many judges when you say this money is for me, my legal fees, and then these other parties to take to the judge. When I was serving at the Supreme Court of Uganda, they told us there was a man whom we had never talked about, who used to come and sit in the open court, and he was collecting bribes on our behalf. When we tried to nab him, but we had never talked to him. He would access the cause list and find the judges, and I don't know what he was doing, but there's real corruption by the judges, but sometimes there's also real corruption by court staff. And then unscrupulous lawyers, unfortunately, also contribute that. And then even the public. So let's do our part. Let's live a life of integrity as individuals. And then when it comes to talking about the price, there are different ways. When you object or you are not agreeable with a different position, you don't have to wake up and fight with the person that you don't agree with. Each one of us will have to sit down in our community with our friends. For example, boycotting, boycott used to be one of the measures in the past. If you read our constitutional history, our grandfathers, they used strategies of boycott. They used strategies of, like I saw one of the leaders, I think one of the new MPs saying, let's shun them. Let's shun whoever is engaging in this. Let's show our displeasure that we do not, this is the standard. Any opportunity you have, this is the standard that we are going to follow, and we are not agreeable to this. So you will each one have to find a creative way. This space does not give us enough time to delve into this. If we need to have more time, maybe we'll create another time when we will have to say, but if we are going to discuss all our strategies on X, then the enemy will come and crush us. So we will need to find safe spaces where we discuss some of the things, in different groups. As student leaders, what do we do? If you have a corrupt whatever, if you have a corrupt leader, if you have a corrupt relative, if you have this. So there will need to be maybe the RNB will have to think about creative ways where people can, we can share these different strategies. What has worked in Kenya, for example? I had a lawyer from Kenya saying ours is better. So what is working in Kenya that can't work in Uganda? Is it that we are less civilized than the Kenyans? How did the Kenyans do it? I, for one, I recommended, for example, for judicial independence. I said, let's have a judiciary-wide inquiry into corruption. I know, and because now I'm being labeled as the worst judge ever in Uganda for having disagreed with my Chief Justice to follow the Constitution. That has earned me, the tribunal I'm supposed to be facing. And I'm like, why are you wasting time? The real problems in Uganda are corruption. We have judicial impunity, judicial corruption, and corruption by other public officials. We have public scandals, that go on uninvestigated. So if we want to clean up the judiciary and ensure judicial independence, let's bring good cases to court. Let our lawyers do their best. But on the side of the judiciary, let's also pull up our socks. If you are writing a judgment, I know we judicial officers, for those who do that, we write this. I've reviewed the law. I've carefully reviewed the law and the evidence, and I'm convinced, and I agree with the testimony of this party and the other party. What have you reviewed? Which law have you reviewed? I know we have problems of backlog, but these kind of judgments make us susceptible to allegations of corruption, and it becomes very difficult. Because when you don't go through those steps, sometimes you can even commit errors when you haven't even, been corrupt. Indefensible errors. You haven't reviewed the law carefully, you haven't reviewed the evidence carefully and gone through the steps. But because you want a case off your table, you say, I've carefully reviewed the law. And later on, it turns out that the law actually, demands that you should have decided for one party and you decided for the other. How do you defend yourself against charges of corruption or incompetence, for that matter? So for me, I am retired, but I'm on record. If anybody wants to clean up the image of the judiciary of Uganda, I'm ready to come and line up as a retired judicial officer. Let my record be examined. I served with integrity, and I never took a bribe. So those judicial officers who are not corrupt, you should not have a problem joining me and say, I'm not corrupt. This is my record. Okay? So that we can take the bad tomatoes out of the good ones, and we continue serving the people of Uganda. As long as we keep quiet, when you are an accomplice, if you keep quiet, then we'll all get the stain of corrupt judges, incompetent judges, and we need to clear up our names. Let's clear up our names by writing sound judgments. When it comes to impunity, again, we need to call out our leaders. First of all, our leaders. We are usually focused on the presidents, but look at the MPs. You know, I've seen many people being charged by the Computer Misuse Act. Who passed the Computer Misuse Act? It's some members of parliament. And some of them have been elected back in parliament. These are supposed to be your representatives. So if somebody is abusing you and there is no substance in what they are saying, the law already provided for defamation. I, for one, have some pending defamation cases in court. Okay? Although the courts have refused to date to give me a hearing, or failed to give me a hearing. But you don't lock up somebody because they have spoken, badly about you. That is cowardice. If they are talking about your work, then let's look at your work. Did you comply with the standards? That is the judicial impunity people are talking about, and we judges, if we don't do our work, unfortunately, that will continue. And by the way, as a retired judge, I want to say, in the case of Omnyoko, for example, you are not the first ones. Judges have always been abused. Even judges in the United States. Just check out on Google at the Supreme Court how the Americans say our judges have lost it, they are nuts, and that kind of thing. In the Omnyoko case, for example, Omnyoko wrote a memo to all of us. And his memo was that he did not trust judges from Central and Western Uganda. He trusted judges from the North and Northeast. And I read that memo. And I was, of course, startled. I was like, how can justice be measured in terms of which part of the country you come from? But I said, okay, this is his belief. I'm going to do justice to this matter. When I issued the Omnyoko judgment, Omnyoko was, people at the court told me, he was like, Chisache is the only judge at the Supreme Court. But I come from Central Uganda. And I'd switched. I didn't talk to him. I didn't take a bribe from him. But he looked at the judgment of the majority and looked at my dissent, and he was like, wow. I think he sat down and said, maybe I'd misjudged this judge. We need to earn the respect of Ugandans by doing the right thing. And we have the Constitution to guide us. We have laws to guide us. Let's not hide behind our wigs and our judicial robes to be corrupt, to judge cases with impunity, or to hide behind public offices and, unleash the law on Ugandans who are enforcing the Constitution. It is very unfortunate, and the more we do it, we are digging a grave for all of us. And if Uganda collapses, we shall all be buried in it. And the other countries are closing their doors by the day. For those who think that they are pushing, jabs at Justice Sache, I'm out of the country for now. Try now to come where I am, and you see if you go through how many will go through the immigration. And that's happening in the other countries. And these countries are right. Why should we mess up our country and then we run to other countries where they are following the law? You see? Why? These are the questions citizens of other countries are asking. So, and the other thing for Genesis, I just want to tell you that for us who have, I'm 66 years old, and I've seen governments come and governments fall. When Idi Amin took over Kampala, I was in Kampala. Okay? Actually, my father was in primary 7. So I saw the government of Idi Amin fall. I saw the government of Obote fall. The government Obote, Obote 1 Obote 2. So, and beyond Uganda, we've seen other governments fall. So those who are in leadership, my prayer, President Museveni and your son, Muhoozi Kainerugaba, members of the police, please follow the constitution and do the right thing. You'll earn the love and respect of Ugandans if you do the right thing. And when it comes to the elections, we need an audit. The recently concluded elections did not meet the international standards for organizing free and fair elections in Uganda. You can't have your rivals being beaten, being stopped to campaign, and then all this, the army taking over the process of, the electoral process, and then at the end of the day, you say someone was declared a winner. How? Under what law? The army is not supposed to be involved in election processes. So this impunity is continuing, unfortunately, especially by the current leadership, which came into power to liberate Ugandans according to their, the records, but now has turned around to do what they are doing. They are red, they know the law, and they put the same constitution in power which they are violating. So our duty as Ugandans are to speak up. Of course, for some of us who are speaking from safety, we continue to speak up. But we are also going to look at other avenues of how we can have this message, communicated. And but as Ugandans, if you're in the country, you can have a silent, in law there's something called shunning. Let's shun them. Or let's write, anyway, there are many things that we could say, but let each one of us look at what we can do in our capacities, of course, taking into account your personal situation, and do what you can do.
Okay. Njagala okubategeeza mwe bannansi, bannayuganda bannaffe, ensi endala zonna zitandise okuggalawo ensalo zaazo eri abagwira. Ensi ezikoleredde enfuga ya demokrasiya n'okubaawo kw'abantu obulungi zibuuza, lwaki mudduka ewammwe nga mwonoonyeeyo ate nga mwegomba eno gye tutereezeza kati mubeereeyo mutereeze ewammwe? Ennaku zino ensi zibuuza nti mwonoona ewammwe, ne mubabba abantu b'ewammwe, ne mubakolako ebikolobero, ne mwonoona ate nga mwagala kubeera walungi. Nja kugereza gwali ku video zange, noza mumanyi omwana afuka ku buliri, oba naawe kenyini alaba bw'oba mu buto bwafuka ku buliri. Omuto bw'amala okufuka ku buliri sayidi eno, ate ayagala addukeyo agende ku sayidi etamunnyogogera kyokka nga yayonoonyeeyo. Kati ye gavumenti ya Museveni emala okufuka mu Uganda ate nenoonye wakalu. Bwe kiba ng'ensi zonna zitandise okuggalawo ensalo zaazo eri abajoozi, nkubuuza gwe munnayuganda, gwe nga gwe olowooza ki ku kutereeza ensi nga saawa eno ne bw'olowooza nti tekigaanibwa kugenda wabula nga kikalubyemu? Ogenda kubeera otya mu nsi enyonoone nga weesuuliddeyo gwa naggamba? Omulamuzi agamba nti bano we batuusizza bwe baba beetaaga batemeko ekitundu babeere eri gye basobola okuttira abantu, bo gye basamba amayumba nga bwe baagadde, gye bakera ne bawamba amayumba g'abantu nga bwe baagadde. Bannayuganda abakkiriza nti nno ffe tukkiririza mu kuwuliziganya ne bwe tuba tetukkaanyiza mu ndowooza, nabo basigaze paati eyaabwe baddukanye obulamu. Bwe nnaayogera ojja kugamba nnimba, kankutwale butereevu omulamuzi nga bw'abyogedde.
We are supposed to be responsible if you have employees doing things that, end up injuring the property of others. But now you have a situation in our governance where you have masked, uniformed soldiers who have even removed their names. And now, like in the recent case of the lawyer who was locked, thrown on the pickup. I saw the tape by Honorable Naveshe, who led that delegation. He called the Inspector General of Police, and the Inspector General of Police is saying, talk to those guys and talk to those on the ground and let them follow the chain of command. So who is in charge? Is it the Inspector General of Police, or the small or the junior officer who is stationed in front of Robert Kyagulanyi's house? How can we have this kind of it's like circus. If you are the Inspector General of Police and you have soldiers wearing police uniform, you should be able to know who is stationed in front of Kyagulanyi. How can you now defer to to citizens, to the officers, to say follow the the order, the chain of command, when they are telling you we want to go in this house and visit and check on our clients? So if the soldiers on the ground have removed their names, and we can't get them, we know the name of the Inspector General of Police. And we are the ones who know the law should now put pressure on the Inspector General of Police to account why we have a roadblock in front of Robert Kyagulanyi's house, violating the rights of not only Robert Kyagulanyi but all the owners in the area. How can you camp on the private property of a Ugandan citizen? How? Has a crime been committed in the ground, in the home of Robert Kyagulanyi? Has a crime been committed there? These are things we are talking about. You can't have it. How can we claim we have the rule of law in Uganda when you can, armed soldiers can, or armed people in uniform, whether army or police, can just go and decide to create a military barracks in the home of a Ugandan citizen, even if he's the head of a political party. Even when we are doing investigations, you don't have those rights. And for how long do you cordon off if there's a crime, but there's no crime, but we have camped there because we are in leadership? These things must stop. For those who are in leadership, you are, it's a shame to all of us. Let's not continue shaming. If you have no shame, personally, Uganda has a name. Uganda has a name. Let's protect our name, because all of us, we can't just turn into Kenyans or Americans or whatever it is. There's a process if you are lucky. But as long as we haven't assumed the citizenship of another country, we are Ugandans. But we can't have this situation where there are laws on private property, and as lawyers, we need to find a creative way of putting pressure on some of these things to stop. If you contest in an election, that is a political contest. But you also have a right to home, which is protected, and your privacy is protected under Article, I think, 26 of the Constitution. 26, yeah. So this impunity must stop. And by the way, I'm saying all this as a peace-loving Ugandan, and we love peace. But peace which comes at the cost of violating the rights of Ugandans or some Ugandans is not peace. We all have a right to enjoy peace. You can't say for us you have peace, let those ones not have peace. Where are they going to go? That's why I said, if you don't want them, cut off a part of Uganda so that the rest of us, some of us who believe we can talk to others who don't agree with, maybe we'll live in Western Uganda, Western or Eastern, I don't know. But let's just divide Uganda into two. The one where those who believe, lock up everybody, take over anybody's house, camp wherever you want to camp, kill whoever you want to kill. Let them live in one part of Uganda. But that's not the Uganda we were born into, and the Uganda we all, subscribe to, and the Uganda that we, is supposed to be as a country. And our leaders need to follow the law.
Nkutegeeza gwe munnansi nti ekiseera ky'okulonda kyali kikulu nnyo eri buli omu, kubanga kyekiseera bannansi kye baba nakyo okusalawo. Naye ekiseera ekyo bw'okikwasa omufere kyova olaba kyonooneka. Omuntu atalina ntobo, atalina bintu kwayimiridde, y'ensonga lwaki omulamuzi Byabakama bwe yakwata mu kulonda yafuuka omukongozi nga mayembe agamwogererako ga yero, buli ayagadde ayogerera ku mutwe gwe. Mwalaba mu kalulu nga takyayogera, Muhoozi ayogera, buno ne bunakunkunye eddanga Kabanda bwogera, kwegamba buli omu ow'NRM yali authority mu kalulu. Kyava kuki? Bunafu bw'akakiiko k'ebyokulonda. Kakati wuliriza ebirowoozo by'omulamuzi. Omukyalo omukulu amanyi amateeka kikyayogera ku biki Byabakama bye yakola mu kalulu.
What happened to conflict of interest rules? Is that what the office of the Attorney General is supposed to do under our constitution? And in my letter to him, I said, maybe you are right. Can we have a debate? I've never had a response from him. I know he was busy campaigning, but now maybe that the campaigns are over, I would be glad to have a debate with him, because I asked him, maybe you are right. Can we have a public debate so that you can tell the people of Uganda which provisions of the constitution you are interpreting? To advise the president, to advise the Judicial Service Commission that a judge who has attained 60 years of age cannot voluntarily retire from the Supreme Court or any other court. These are the things we need to take up. For me, I don't need sympathy. What I call upon the people of Uganda to see is like, if this is happening to a Supreme Court justice who knows the law and who has articulated the law, I told the Attorney General in that letter, the letter is publicly available, that he's incompetent. I also wrote to the President and I said the Attorney General is incompetent, as is endangering, every day he remains in office, he's endangering our country. Because if he can't give advice, proper advice on a matter as simple as a judge can retire after attaining 60 years, what other how are we sure that he's giving correct advice on much more complex and maybe much more complex issues than that? So we need to examine some of the things, and I know there are many fronts we need to tackle, but I would be happy to partner with the Ugandans, the bar and the other Ugandans, to tackle some of these people and say, why should you hold this office? And engage. Because otherwise, how can you proudly be up and say, I am the Attorney General of Uganda, but this constitution, this provision reads this, but for me, it reads this. You may say so, but tell us what is your basis. If there are cases, cite the cases that back up your interpretation. Otherwise, what are you doing in that office? The same for Justice Byabakama. The results are declared at each polling station. When the Ugandans vote, the election, the results are declared at each polling station, right? And I think if I need to look at this, I wanted to look at it before, but a copy is supposed to be left. Somebody can check it out. A copy of the results, declaration forms are supposed to be left at each polling station. But some of these polling stations were put in, some were put in roads, schools, open spaces. So where were those copies pinned? So how can those results be valid? And just I saw a video, because sometimes it says beware of fake videos, but this was a video where he was recording it, and it's available on Twitter, where I was saying, why are Ugandans complaining? What is wrong? How can you give Ugandans totals when you haven't shown them how we have arrived at those totals? We lawyers are known not to be good at math. So I don't know whether, now he became a professor of math, but lawyers are not, our specialty is not mathematics. But in any case, why don't you give us the opportunity to also add up? Declared. Why did we have the polling stations in the first place? If we are not going to follow that, how can it be that when we are voting, we have polling stations, then at the tail end of the results, we have your totals? No, before he resigns, he owes Ugandans an explanation, because he has been in this position, and he has gazetted the results where there are questions, and he's not answering the questions. And now I saw something where he has they are going around and they are threatening. Is it Uganda Communications Commission is issuing a communication to radios? Why don't you want Ugandans to voice their concerns about how this process was conducted? The same way you decided in this day of technology that elections should be conducted in darkness. What are you hiding, Justice Byabakama? Because if you have nothing to hide, then you want all the transparency. Technology is here with us to stay.
Oluvannyuma lw'akalulu abantu bangi musaze entotto kwoyo eyayonoona akalulu n'akadibaga. Abamu batandise okugamba nti Byabakama alizayininge ave mu kifo. Naye mujjukire okudibaga Byabakama kwadibazeemu okumu kuteeberezebwa okubanga kusasule nga weewaawe afunye ssente nnyingi nnyo mu kudibaga obululu. Omuntu bw'otyo bw'omugamba okulizayininga supiidi oyo agenda nakyo, mwe musemba nakyo. Omulamuzi agamba okulizayininga kwalibaddewo naye omala kwansalinga. Sooka oddemu ebibuuzo nga tonnaba na kuva mu ntebe bannansi be bakubuuza. That is the Lady Justice. Akugamba nti Lady Justice, the retired Lady Justice Esther Kitimbo Kisakya agamba Byabakama nga tonnava mu ntebe tuddemu ebibuuzo abantu bibakubuuza results wazijjanga wa si kudduka buddusi kakati abantu bakuvumya ow'ensonga odduke gw'ogenda olya essente eyo. Katumuwulirize kye yayogedde ku nsonga eyo.
These are things, I think the challenges that are facing our country will have to be, there are many, and we have to tackle them systematically because different strategies are needed for different challenges. Now, in the case of Justice Byabakama, yes, resignation is one of them. But when the president was saying is like he was a figurehead, whether he was a figurehead or not, once you decide to hold, once you decide to you accept to serve in an office and you remain in that office, you remain accountable. In 1980, since we had some genesis, I just want to say in the 1980s when the elections that led to President Museveni and some of the his colleagues going to start the Bush War, as it's usually called, we had elections, and I think the person who was in charge of those elections was Sekono, if I'm not mistaken. And the late Paulo Mwanga ordered that he shouldn't release those results. And I think Sekono had to, didn't declare and I think had to run to exile, I think, to protect himself. And then out of that, of course, the president decided to take the armed struggle route. So what I'm trying to say, this pretext, because I saw the same thing with the chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, like, I can't do anything because I'm being threatened. Yes, when you take over these offices, It comes with privilege and honor, but it also comes with the responsibility. And you should be able to discharge that responsibility. The moment you realize that you can't discharge that responsibility, bow out. Bow out. But this continuation of saying,